welcome back. This is Weekly Review, and I'm your host, Rob Awahan. Now it's time for Media in Check. This is the part of the show where we talk about pressing and compelling media issues and how they fit in our society. And today we have Angela Jung joining us in the studio to give us those updates. Now, in preparing for this topic, I've been thinking about how would I describe social media to a time traveler from the 1970s or the 1980s? And it's amazing how this new technology has changed so many things. So, Angela, welcome to the studio. How are you today?
Good, thank you. Good morning, Rob. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing quite well, actually. I feel very cheerful this morning.
Wow.
But I would like to know, for you, from 1 to 10, and 1 means like, I forgot my password, and 10 means like my life goal is to be an influencer. How far in are you with social media? How much does it fill up your mind and your time and your habits?
So I would say I used to be sort of 5 because I used to not really post anything. I just look at what other people have to say or what other people have to post. But these days, as working to promote and as marketing the gallery I work for, maybe I would say I'm at maybe 8 or even 9, to be honest.
Well, when you have something to promote, and then there are so many platforms, right? And you have to post it on here, and then on here, and then on here, and what time of day and what time zone. It gets confusing.
Yes. So I'm not a huge fan or user of social media, meaning I don't really post everything every day. But like I said, I do check others' feeds pretty often, mostly to keep in touch with friends overseas and check out really what's up with them. And recently, I've been really purchasing a lot of stuff on social media without my really intention to do so because they know too well about myself.
Yeah, they've got me figured out too. Every time I'm scrolling, every ad I see, it's like laser targeted to my personal, the impulse purchases that I make without thinking. Those are always the ones I see.
That's right.
I also don't put every single thing. I don't think everybody needs to know what I had for breakfast. But it's a great way to stay in touch with family and stuff like that, like you said.
Yeah, right. So in my generation, I would say we started mostly SNS or social media to be connected with people we become friends with. Especially when I traveled a lot and lived in more than one country, it played a really critical role as a messenger and platform to stay in touch with others, right?
Yeah.
But what about yourself?
Well, I found that too. I mean, as an expatriate living in a country different from my family, Facebook was a wonderful way to share some pictures, share some, here's what I did, here's something I learned, and feel connected to, I've met my nephews and nieces, only a few times, but I get to see a video clip of somebody taking their first step. And that's great. But these days, things are different than that, right? So today's story is about trends in social media and kind of the MZ generation switching from social media where people show off to social media where people are like blogging and recording their life instead, right?
Right. So for those of the listeners who are not really quite familiar with the Generation MZ, Generation MZ is a term referring to both millennials born between 1980 and 1995 and Generation Z who are born between 1996 and 2010.
Yeah.
So the blog, which was thought to be outdated, is attracting attention among the MZ generation. It's an analysis that people who feel tired of open social media that have no choice but to be conscious of the gaze of others are looking for blogs these days with relatively loose connections. An interviewee in her 20s who started a blog this year said, I started to record my thoughts on blogs because Instagram is linked with my contact information, so it's easy for my post to be exposed to people around me.
You don't always want your coworkers to know what you think about the election.
Exactly.
Yes.
But since blogs don't have such a function, it's nice to be honestly express what I feel without paying attention to the people around me. And in fact, the number of MZ generation bloggers is increasing. According to 2021 blog report released by Naver at the end of last year, there were about 2 million newly created blogs last year, and the total number of blogs exceeded 30 million. The number of newly created blog content recorded 300 million, an increase of more than 50% compared to the previous year. And the most striking thing is that 70% of all Naver bloggers are from the MZ generation. In particular, users in their teens and 20s accounted for 44% of the total.
So that's not even the M, that's just the Z is 44% of the total. Wow. Now, I used to write a blog in the mid kind of around between the 2000 to 2012 during that other kind of peak of blogging. But I thought it had faded away entirely. So it's an interesting trend that youngsters are more inclined to record their thoughts without kind of in that anonymous way so they don't have to worry what other people see or say or judge. That's interesting to me because a lot of popular SNS are not good places to record your thoughts. A lot of ideas are too complex for, the 280 characters you get on Twitter. And a lot of the other ones are mostly focused on pictures or video. So I'm excited to hear people are interested in expressing themselves with more depth and more nuance. I think that's something we need.
Right, exactly. So according to the major social media platform trends of Generation Z report at the end of last year, which was a survey conducted by the University Tomorrow 20 Research Institute on 600 men and women aged 15 to 25 across the nation, 31.2% of them reported they posted a Naver blog post at least once a week. And this was higher than the Instagram feed posting rate, which was 24.4%.
So actually higher. Wow. From the buzz that I hear and kind of the PR hype, it seems to me like places like Instagram and TikTok, the photo and short video focused places were more the style. So that seems like a opposite direction from blogging. Now, experts are calling this an exile from social media that's mostly for bragging. Is that right?
Right. So Oh Gong-hoon, a popular culture critic, said Facebook and Instagram are basically social media for bragging because interactivity represented by so-called likes stands out. So it's accepted as an extension of interpersonal and social life.
Right. Look at my new hat. Look at my new handbag.
Right.
Yeah.
And Professor Ryu Woong-jae of the Department of Media and Communication at Hanyang University said, rather than video-oriented media that excessively consumes like culture and images that show off one's daily life, a blog that leaves a truthful and clear record of one's daily life and interests is emerging as a new trend.
Now, I remember when Instagram first came out, it was more like, here's my baby, here's my puppy, here's a cute thing my kids said. But these days, it almost seems more like a branding platform. And people even talk about their personal brands.
Exactly. When I look at one of my first photo posts on Instagram, probably back in 2012, there were simply my own records, but in the form of pictures. And I liked the Instagram because I felt like it was my own diary of images rather than bragging myself. But as you mentioned, today it's very much about containing who you are, what you do, where you go, and with whom. And not only that, also, like you said, a lot of accounts, I would say probably more than half of what I follow are businesses that are selling their products and services. So I'm not surprised that people are moving away from this and instead going back to a more of a genuine me-time social media to find themselves during their very personal time.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me. Now, recently social media has been in the spotlight for the damage that it can do to people's confidence when people feel they can't live up to the images they see. Maybe I put that perfect selfie up and nobody sees that it took me 200 tries to get the angle and the light and everything just perfect. So social media can be a great way to stay in touch across long distances. But, it's led to political fighting with misinformation stuff. And it's also led to that awful feeling that, my life just isn't as cool as my friends, or I'm not as attractive as my friends. So blogs where people can put their thoughts in detail instead of just reacting to other commenters or comparing their lives to their friend's new handbag. Maybe it's a starting point for some healthier online behavior than we've seen lately.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for this story, Angela.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you today, and I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
And that's it for Media in Check.